What happens when the line between friendship and love blurs in the tight space of a college dorm room? Pause. This isn't just any BL webtoon or yaoi romance. It's a love story that feels achingly real. Two roommates. One who hides his feelings behind silence. One who insists he's straight. But one night, when laughter turned into silence, and silence turned into something heavier, he pulled his friend into his bed, and nothing was ever the same again. College life was supposed to be simple for Minho. Study, survive exams, avoid embarrassing himself in front of strangers. That was the plan. But all of that changed when he was assigned a roommate, Jisoo. Jisoo was the opposite of Minho in every possible way. Where Minho preferred silence, Jisoo thrived in noise. Where Minho lingered at the edges of a room, Jisoo stood at its very center. Jisoo was loud, confident, and endlessly charming. The kind of guy who could walk into a crowded classroom and have half the room smiling at him before he even said a word. He was magnetic. His laugh carried, bold and unashamed, a sound that drew people closer without them realizing it. Within a week of the new semester, he had already collected numbers in his phone, messages lighting up his screen late into the night, girls and boys alike hoping for just a fraction of his attention. Minho, on the other hand, was quiet, reserved. The studious type who kept his head down, who knew the library's shadowed corners better than any cafe or bar in the city. He lived with his headphones in, not always listening to music but using them as a shield, a silent barrier between himself and the chaos of the outside world. He was the type of boy who kept his shirts neatly folded, who remembered deadlines weeks in advance, who thought carefully before speaking, if he spoke at all. And yet, despite their differences, or perhaps because of them, Jisoo noticed him. It started with something small. One afternoon, Minho sat at his usual corner table in the library, head bent low over his notebook, glasses slipping slightly down the bridge of his nose. He didn't notice the way Jisoo drifted in, half bored, pretending to look for a book. He didn't notice how Jisoo's gaze lingered on him longer than necessary, tracing the slope of his shoulders, the sharp concentration in his eyes. Jisoo had seen dozens of boys before, but none who seemed so entirely unaware of their own quiet gravity. When Jisoo finally approached, Minho looked up startled, like a deer caught in the sudden beam of light. "You always sit here?" Jisoo asked, leaning casually against the table, grin tugging at his lips. Minho blinked, unsure how to respond. "Sometimes," he said finally, voice soft, guarded. Jisoo chuckled. "You look like you're solving the secrets of the universe. What's more important than talking to me, huh?" It was teasing, careless on the surface, but underneath, there was curiosity. Minho adjusted his glasses, trying to return to his notes, but his ears burned red. He didn't know why this boy, this loud, magnetic boy, was speaking to him. He didn't know how to handle the weight of his gaze. From that day on, Jisoo kept finding excuses to be near him. Sometimes it was in the cafeteria, plopping his tray down across from Minho's with a grin that said he belonged there. Sometimes it was outside the lecture hall, waiting just a beat longer than necessary until Minho walked out, pretending it was coincidence. And sometimes it was in the smallest ways, an offhand joke, a brush of shoulders in a too crowded hallway, the way his hand lingered a second too long when he passed Minho a pen. Minho didn't understand it. People like Jisoo didn't pay attention to people like him. Yet the more Jisoo stayed, the harder it became to ignore the truth. He liked it. He liked him. But liking Jisoo was dangerous. Because Jisoo was the type of boy who belonged to the world. His smile wasn't just Minho's. It was shared with anyone lucky enough to catch it. His laughter wasn't a secret. It was a performance. He wasn't the kind of boy you could keep. He wasn't the kind of boy who slowed down long enough to notice someone like Minho. And yet, Jisoo did. The nights were the worst. Minho would sit in his dorm room, pretending to read, but every thought circled back to the same thing: the curve of Jisoo's grin, the warmth in his eyes when they lingered on him too long, the memory of his voice echoing in places where Minho had only ever known silence. It was confusing. It was terrifying. And it was intoxicating. Because for all his confidence, for all the effortless charm, Jisoo seemed different when it was just the two of them. The laughter softened. The jokes grew slower, quieter. Sometimes they sat together in the library, and Jisoo didn't speak at all, just leaned back in his chair, tapping his pencil idly against the table, watching Minho write. It felt like something suspended, fragile, waiting for one of them to name it. But naming it would change everything. The moment finally came one evening when the campus was hushed and heavy with rain. The storm had scattered most students back to their dorms, but Jisoo found Minho still in the library, stubbornly working through his notes. "You're insane," Jisoo said, sliding into the chair beside him, shaking rain from his hair. "Do you live here?" Minho glanced up, startled again by his presence, though he should have expected it by now. "It's quiet," he murmured. Jisoo leaned closer, his voice dropping. "It's not quiet anymore." The words hung between them. Minho's heart stumbled, breath caught. He wanted to look away, but Jisoo's eyes pinned him in place. And then, without warning, Jisoo reached out, fingers brushing Minho's hand where it rested on the table. Just a touch. Barely. There. But it burned like fire. Minho froze, his throat closed. "Why are you doing this?" he whispered, voice breaking despite himself. "You don't. This isn't. You don't mean it." Jisoo tilted his head, smile fading into something softer, more vulnerable than Minho had ever seen. "What if I do?" The rain battered against the windows. The silence between them pulsed alive. And in that moment, Minho knew. The boy who was everything he wasn't, the boy who shouldn't have noticed him at all, had. From there, things shifted. The campus didn't notice, not yet. To everyone else, Jisoo was still the flirt, still the center of every party, still the boy with too many numbers in his phone. But with Minho, he was something else, something quieter, more careful. There were still jokes, of course. Jisoo could never resist teasing him, never resist tugging him out of his comfort zone with a grin. But there were also stolen glances across classrooms, lingering touches when no one was watching, nights spent shoulder to shoulder under the glow of library lamps, where neither of them said the word for what they were becoming, but both of them knew. And Minho changed. Slowly, subtly, the quiet boy, who had once hidden behind his headphones, began to lift his head. He began to look back when Jisoo looked at him. He began to speak more, to laugh more, to let himself feel more, because Jisoo was like sunlight, too bright, too much, but impossible to resist. And in that light, Minho found himself blooming. It wasn't perfect. There were misunderstandings. There were moments of jealousy, of fear, of wondering if Jisoo would grow bored, move on, leave him behind. But Jisoo stayed. Time and time again, Jisoo stayed. And beneath the storm of campus life, beneath the chaos of classes and parties and expectations, a truth rooted itself quietly, deeply between them. They didn't need to shout it to the world. They didn't need labels or declarations, because in the way Jisoo's laughter softened when it was just for Minho, in the way Minho's gaze steadied when Jisoo leaned closer. The truth was already clear. In a world that had told them they were opposites, they had found their match, and in each other they had found something worth holding on to. But fate, or maybe just the college housing office, decided to throw them together. One small dorm room, two very different boys. At first, it was chaos. Pure, unfiltered chaos. Jisoo's sneakers were everywhere, kicked off carelessly at the door, one always tipping over like it had collapsed mid-run. His guitar leaned against the desk, strings occasionally thrumming when someone brushed past. The scent of cologne lingered in the air, sharp and teasing, blending with the faint traces of energy, drink cans he stacked like trophies on the shelf. And above it all, his laughter, loud, unrestrained, unapologetic. The kind of laughter that seemed too big for the four walls of their shared dorm room, spilling into the hallway, drawing curious looks from passing students. Minho hated it, or at least he told himself he did. He muttered under his breath, grumbled as he shoved Jisoo's sneakers out of the way so he wouldn't trip. He adjusted his books neatly on the desk, only for Jisoo's guitar pick to somehow slip between the pages. He turned up the volume on his headphones, trying to drown out the sound of Jisoo's endless strumming, half songs, unfinished melodies, chords that trailed off whenever Jisoo grew distracted. For Minho, who thrived on silence and order, it was unbearable. This room had once been his sanctuary, a space where he could fold himself into the quiet and disappear into books, into numbers, into anything that didn't involve messy emotions or noisy people. And now, it felt like living with a thunderstorm. But slowly, so slowly Minho almost didn't notice, it began to shift. Because beneath the noise and bravado, Jisoo had this way of making Minho feel seen. It wasn't obvious at first. It was in the little things. The way Jisoo always returned from late-night snack runs with an extra bag of chips, wordlessly placing them beside Minho's notebooks. The way he'd nudge Minho's shoulder when he realized he hadn't moved in hours, grinning, as he said, "You're not a robot, you know. Humans need breaks." The way his teasing, though constant, never quite crossed the line. It was sharp, yes, but somehow softened at the edges, as if the point wasn't to wound, but to draw Minho out of his shell. Minho didn't know what to do with it. He was used to being overlooked, fading into the background while louder personalities took up space. People didn't notice the quiet boy who kept his headphones in, who stuck to the shadows. But Jisoo did, and that was terrifying. One evening, it became impossible to ignore. The dorm was quieter than usual, most students out at some campus event. Minho sat hunched over his desk, scribbling notes beneath the dim light of his lamp. His hand ached from hours of writing, his back stiff, but he refused to stop until he finished the chapter. Then, out of nowhere, Jisoo's voice broke the silence. "You're going to break your spine like that?" Minho blinked, looking up to find Jisoo sprawled across his bed, strumming his guitar lazily. He hadn't even noticed him come in. "I'm fine," Minho muttered, eyes darting back to the page. Jisoo set the guitar aside and sat up, tilting his head. "Fine? You've been in the same position for 3 hours. Do you even know what day it is anymore?" I said I'm fine. But Jisoo didn't look convinced. He pushed off the bed, crossing the room in a few strides. Before Minho could react, Jisoo reached out and plucked the pen straight from his hand. "Hey," Minho snapped, startled. "Break," Jisoo said firmly, tucking the pen behind his ear like it belonged to him now. 5 minutes, non-negotiable. Minho glared, frustration prickling at his chest. But underneath it, something else, something warm, unwelcome, curling low in his stomach. Because no one else did this. No one else cared enough to pull him away from his endless self-imposed discipline. No one else looked at him with that combination of mischief and sincerity, as though Minho's well-being mattered more than the grade he was chasing. "Why do you care?" Minho asked quietly, almost more to himself than to Jisoo. Jisoo didn't hesitate. "Because you're my roommate, genius. Can't let you self-destruct in my room. Bad vibes." But the grin on his lips faltered for just a moment, replaced by something softer. Something Minho almost missed if he hadn't been looking closely. And Minho's chest tightened. The days blurred after that. Minho found himself watching Jisoo more often than he wanted to admit. The way he sprawled across his bed with complete disregard for posture, humming nonsense melodies under his breath. The way he laughed with his whole body, shoulders shaking, eyes crinkling, like joy was something that couldn't be contained. The way his voice softened, almost imperceptibly, when it was just the two of them in the room. It was maddening, because Minho couldn't figure it out. Jisoo was the type of boy who could have anyone, loud, bold, magnetic. He wasn't supposed to spend this much time with someone like Minho. He wasn't supposed to look at him like that, as though Minho's silence was worth listening to. And yet, he did. The turning point came one night when the power went out. A storm raged outside, rain hammering against the windows, thunder rolling through the campus like a drumbeat. The dorm plunged into darkness, broken only by the faint glow of emergency lights in the hallway. Minho sat stiffly at his desk, heart thudding, trying not to show how unsettled he felt by the sudden blackout. He hated storms, hated the way they stole control, how powerless they made him feel. Then a flame flickered to life. Jisoo sat cross-legged on his bed, holding up a lighter with a small candle balanced precariously on his desk. "Relax," he said softly, the teasing edge gone from his voice. "It's just the power. Happens all the time." Minho didn't move. His throat felt tight. Jisoo's gaze lingered on him for a long moment. Then without a word, he patted the empty space beside him. "Come here." Minho hesitated. Every instinct told him to retreat, to bury himself in books and wait for the storm to pass. But something in Jisoo's voice, gentle, steady, pulled him forward. He sat down cautiously on the edge of the bed, trying not to let their knees brush. But the space was small, and Jisoo was warm. And suddenly Minho was hyper-aware of every inch between them. For once, Jisoo didn't joke. He didn't tease. He just sat there, the glow of the candlelight softening the sharp lines of his face. "You always look like the world's about to collapse on you," Jisoo murmured. "But it's not. You're allowed to breathe, you know." Minho's breath caught. He turned his head, meeting Jisoo's eyes in the dim light, and something shifted. The chaos, the noise, the endless storm that was Jisoo. It didn't feel overwhelming anymore. It felt safe. And Minho realized with a jolt of fear and something dangerously like hope that he didn't hate the chaos at all. He wanted it. He wanted him. From that night onward, things were different. The sneakers were still scattered. The guitar still leaned against the desk. The laughter still filled the tiny dorm room, spilling out into the hallway. But Minho no longer grumbled quite as much. He no longer shoved the sneakers aside with annoyance, but with a faint, almost hidden smile. He no longer buried himself entirely in books, but allowed himself to pause when Jisoo placed a snack on his desk. He no longer pretended to be deaf to the guitar strumming, but found himself listening, really listening, to the melodies Jisoo coaxed from the strings. because the truth was undeniable now. Beneath the noise, beneath the bravado, beneath every careless grin and teasing remark, Jisoo cared. And Minho, despite every wall he had built, despite every reason he told himself not to, was starting to care back. And that, more than anything, terrified him, because caring meant risk. Caring meant change. Caring meant letting the chaos in, knowing it could shatter the fragile order he had built around his life. But when Jisoo smiled at him in the flicker of candlelight, when his laughter filled the silence, when his hand brushed against Minho's just a moment too long, Minho wondered if maybe, just maybe, the chaos was worth it. And Minho, he hated himself for it, for noticing the way Jisoo's hair fell into his eyes when he laughed, for memorizing the sound of his voice, for wondering what it would be like if, just once, Jisoo's smile was meant only for him. It was the oldest BL manhwa trope in the book, opposites under one roof. But in real life, there were no panel captions to explain away the feelings. There was just Minho, lying awake at night, listening to the steady rhythm of Jisoo's breathing across the room, and realizing with a painful clarity he was falling for someone who could never be his. The weeks slipped by in a blur of late-night study sessions, ramen runs, and shared playlists. On the surface, they were just roommates. Friends, maybe. Two boys surviving the chaos of campus life, trading jabs over who hogged the blanket or whose turn it was to take out the trash. To anyone else, it was ordinary, unremarkable. But underneath, something else simmered. Tension coiled like a secret neither of them wanted to name. Minho felt it most in the small moments. In the way Jisoo sprawled across his bed with his guitar, fingers moving with careless precision over the strings. In the way his laugh seemed to bloom from his chest, reckless and warm, filling the room until Minho forgot what silence even sounded like. And then there were Jisoo's hands. Minho found himself staring too long at them, broad, strong, always in motion. Whether they were tugging at laces, scribbling down notes, or absently drumming against his thigh, Minho's eyes followed. He tried to convince himself it was curiosity, nothing more, but the ache in his chest betrayed him. The worst moments came after practice, when Jisoo would burst through the door still buzzing with energy, sweat clinging to his neck, cheeks flushed. He'd grin, drop his bag in a heap and say, "I'm starving, let's go get food." And Minho would look away quickly, ears burning, pretending to fuss with his books. But the image stayed with him. The light in Jisoo's eyes, the easy confidence of his stride, the way the world seemed to bend a little toward him. It was torture, sweet, relentless torture. One night, it all became too much. They were sprawled out in the cramped room, a movie playing faintly on Jisoo's laptop. The sound was low, forgotten. Jisoo had fallen half asleep against the wall, his head tilted, hair sticking out in messy tufts. The glow of the screen painted his features in soft blue light, highlighting the curve of his jaw, the steady rise and fall of his chest. Minho should have been watching the movie. He should have been taking notes for class, or pretending to scroll through his phone. Anything but this. Instead, he stared. His gaze traced every line of Jisoo's face, memorizing the slope of his nose, the curve of his lips, the way his lashes cast faint shadows against his cheeks. Each detail carved itself into Minho's memory, a sketch he had no right to keep. And for the first time, Minho let himself imagine it, what it would feel like if he reached out, if his fingers brushed against Jisoo's hand, casual, like it meant nothing. What it would feel like if Jisoo leaned closer, if the space between them vanished, If that grin softened into something meant only for him, the thought was a knife and a balm, sharp and soothing all at once. Minho's chest tightened. He pressed his nails into his palm, grounding himself in the sting, because none of it was real, none of it could be real. Jisoo wasn't like him. Jisoo was the boy who flirted with girls in the cafeteria line, who had numbers saved under hearts in his phone, who talked about first dates and crushes without hesitation. He was untouchable, unreachable. And Minho was the one hiding in the quiet, clutching feelings he could never confess. So he turned his face away, swallowed the ache, and forced his eyes shut. Pretending sleep was easier than pretending his heart wasn't breaking. But secrets had a way of leaking through the cracks. It started with the little slips. The way Minho lingered too close when passing Jisoo a notebook. The way his laugh came too easily when Jisoo teased him. The sound soft, almost shy. The way he froze whenever Jisoo touched his shoulder. A casual brush that felt like fire. Jisoo noticed. At first he said nothing, but his gaze lingered longer, curious, questioning. He began testing the boundaries, bumping their knees together under the desk, leaning just a fraction closer when he spoke, brushing fingers against Minho's when they shared snacks. Each touch was electric. Each moment left Minho reeling, wondering if it was deliberate or if his imagination was betraying him again. One evening, after another endless study session, Jisoo tossed his pen onto the desk and leaned back, stretching with a groan. Man, if I fail this exam, I'm blaming you. Minho blinked. Me? I'm the one actually studying. Exactly, Jisoo said, grinning. You make it look too easy. I get distracted just watching you. The words hung in the air, teasing, yes, but something else beneath them, something that made Minho's breath hitch. Don't joke like that, he muttered, eyes fixed on the open textbook. Who said I was joking? Jisoo's tone was light, but his gaze was steady, locked on Minho with an intensity that burned. Minho's chest fluttered, panic and hope colliding. He couldn't breathe, couldn't move, so he did what he always did. He looked away, but the nights grew heavier. Minho's dreams betrayed him, pulling him into endless versions of what could never be, a hand brushing against his, lips hovering too close, laughter spilling into a kiss. He woke tangled in sheets, heart pounding, the ache sharper every time. And Jisoo was still there, still smiling, still teasing, still looking at him with eyes that felt like questions. Minho didn't dare answer. It was unbearable, because Minho knew with painful certainty that something had to give. Either he would bury this forever, lock it so deep inside that not even Jisoo's laughter could shake it loose, or it would spill out, reckless and unstoppable, shattering everything between them. And Minho didn't know which terrified him more. Yet one truth remained, unshakable. Every day, every laugh, every careless brush of Jisoo's hand, Minho's feelings grew. No matter how much he tried to resist, no matter how many times he told himself it was impossible, he couldn't stop. He couldn't stop looking, couldn't stop wanting, couldn't stop falling. And beneath it all, the question lingered, silent but deafening. Did Jisoo know? And if he did, what then? Jisoo noticed things too, though Minho didn't realize it at first. Hey, Jisoo teased one night, tossing a pillow at him. You always look like you're in some drama when you study, all intense. Like your textbook betrayed you. Minho rolled his eyes. Maybe it did. But Jisoo leaned closer, grin lazy. Cute. The word hit harder than it should have. Minho's chest burned, but he forced a laugh, shaking it off. Jisoo was like this with everyone. Careless, flirty, effortless. It didn't mean anything. It couldn't. And yet, there were moments that didn't feel like nothing. Like when Jisoo draped his jacket over Minho's shoulders without a word in the library, or when his hand brushed Minho's as they reached for the same snack. Lingering a second too long, Minho tried to bury it deeper and deeper, but feelings don't stay buried forever. One evening, after a long day of classes, Jisoo returned late. Minho was already in bed pretending to sleep. He heard the rustle of clothes, the creak of the mattress across the room, and then silence. But the silence stretched too long, until suddenly the mattress dipped beside him. Minho froze. "Your bed's warmer," Jisoo muttered, voice low, almost shy. "What are you?" Minho started, but the words died in his throat, because Jisoo was right there, lying beside him, close enough that Minho could feel his breath ghosting against his cheek. The room was dark, the only sound the faint hum of the heater. Minho's heart pounded so hard he was sure Jisoo could hear it. "Don't overthink it," Jisoo whispered, like it was the simplest thing in the world. But his hand brushed Minho's arm, tentative, searching. Minho's breath caught. His body screamed to move, to turn, to close the distance, but his mind raced. "He's straight. He's your roommate. This is wrong. This will ruin everything." And yet, when Jisoo's fingers laced with his, slow and certain, Minho couldn't pull away. That was the night everything changed. The next morning, nothing felt the same. Minho woke to sunlight streaming through the blinds, Jisoo's arm draped heavily across his waist. For a moment, he let himself pretend that this was normal, that Jisoo was his, but reality crashed in fast. Jisoo stirred, blinked blearily at him, and froze. The silence was unbearable. Finally, Minho whispered, "Why?" His voice cracked. "Why are you doing this?" Jisoo looked away, jaw tight. "I don't know." But that wasn't true. It couldn't be. Minho saw it. The flicker of fear, of longing, of something unspoken burning in Jisoo's eyes. And then, before Minho could think, Jisoo leaned in. The kiss was clumsy, desperate, full of everything they'd been holding back. When they pulled apart, breathless, Jisoo's voice was raw. "I don't know what this makes me, but I know I want you." Minho's world tilted. All the fear, all the waiting, all the nights spent aching, it was here, real, alive in the space between them. For the first time, the walls they'd built cracked open. Life didn't magically turn into a BL fairy tale. There were awkward mornings, whispered arguments, fears of being found out. There were moments of doubt when Jisoo questioned himself, when Minho questioned if this could last. But through it all, they held onto each other, because love wasn't about labels. It wasn't about the world outside their dorm room. It was about the way Jisoo reached for Minho's hand under the cafeteria table, the way Minho's laughter softened Jisoo's sharp edges, the way, in the quiet of the night, their hearts beat in sync. They didn't need to shout it. They didn't need to define it. Beneath the chaos of college life in the cramped space of a shared room, they had found something undeniable. What do you think of this story? Heartbreaking, sweet, emotional, or just plain cute? Drop your thoughts in the comments. I'd love to know. And if you enjoyed this BL love story breakdown, don't forget to subscribe for more yaoi manhwa recaps, BL webtoon summaries, and emotional romance stories. Check the description for full story links and more BL recommendations.